I have my 12 teeth set up here, anterior 6, lower 6. I'd be lying to you if I told you that I didn't move them after we finished. I was constantly moving them, taking them out, trimming some necks, putting them back in, checking that my emergence angle is very close. Some I'm still not 100%, but very close. I looked at the lowers. Maybe a hint is it looks a little odd when you got these bony eminences here, the canine eminences. I filled it in with wax for 2 reasons. One, I took some wax off the teeth, not a complete wax up, but a quasi one, so I can see that the emergence angles are the same. 2, a lot of the shrinkage has already occurred. I don't want to do a perfect setup and then add 10 pounds of base plate wax and then have it contract my balanced setup. So I've got a bulk of the wax already. I'm just going to wax up around the margins here and a little bit of the base when I'm done. I'm always anticipating of where I'm going. I know where I've got to go. I know I got to have a denture base. I know I got to wax it up. So I'm not going to hesitate. Slap it on. So my next step, I've got my retromolar pad, plane of occlusion, down the line. Now this is remedial for some of us, but I think some of us are still struggling of getting the midline, the central groove, down pounds line. I'm going to extract the bicuspid, remove some of the tooth structure, ruin my setup in the process with my big thumb. I'll fix it. Oh, I gotta fix it. Bothered me. You can see the amount of overjet I have here is consistent all the way around. Very close all the way around. That doesn't mean I'm still not make a few small adjustments, but it's very close. Don't over reduce. This will be the most challenging tooth is the first bicuspid because of the bone height here is very high. So this neck of the first bicuspid will probably be very thin because I want to maintain the length of this first bicuspid, the same length of the canine. So I remodeled there a bit. So I'm going to probably put on all posterior teeth. We're not dropping any bicuspids. We also have a choice at this point. You could set up the uppers first. If this is Dr. Yeezy's 20-degree setup rule with the CD plane or a flat plate, you can do that. The end result's the same. I think for educational purposes, it's easier, I believe it to be easier, to put the teeth on the ridge because there's nowhere else they can go. They have to go there. They have to go down the line. Try to refrain from getting any sheet wax here and trying to apply it to the model. I think some of us tend to do this kind of stuff and we add like a whole blob of wax. Like, I don't even know where the ridge is. All right? I need to know where it is. If you want to put a little bit and maybe down the lingual side, exposing the buccal side of the ridge because I need my neck down there. The neck of the tooth, you could do that, but don't cover everything up. I'm also looking down here now. Is my canine too high off the plane? I'm just using this line as a reference. Both sides. A little bit more. My goal now is I'm going to set up all 8 posterior teeth. Some of us are struggling with a flat plane, so I want you to do it on a flat plane. With experience, you will put 4 or 5 mesial cusp of 6 on the flat plane and incorporate the compensating curve right away. But for some of us that are confident, go ahead. But what happens when you do that is we just kind of get lazy from trimming the tooth and say, well, it hit the model, my number 7, that's my compensating curve. As much as it's hitting the model. Do you know what I'm saying when I say that? The model doesn't dictate the compensating curve. You do. Right? The ridge And obviously, we're trying to establish balanced occlusion for stability in protrusive. Left lateral, right lateral, balancing contacts so the denture has some stability. Now, a bit of a semantics, because we've got so much bone loss going on, this denture is going to be unstable. But that doesn't give us an excuse and be cavalier not to try to achieve the best contacts. If we're not really clever in our interdigitation here, whether it's lingualized or class 1, then when we go to do soft relines or relines and we ask the patient to close, we're changing the occlusion. It's not a good idea. Remember, central groove, down the pounds line, central line. This one needs to be rotated counterclockwise. And why it can't be is I'm hitting the model right there. I didn't hesitate to take it back off. The wax is still molten, and counterclockwise slightly to make the turn. Incisal line angle of number 3 lines up with the buccal line angle of number 4, not the central groove of number 4 as such. This has to be in here. We get the buccal line angle, incisal line angle of 4 matching the incisal line angle of 3. Don't match the central groove of 4 with that incisal line angle. And now, number 5. Now, with experience, I didn't even try to put number 5 on the model. I'm just going to trim it. No one's going to see underneath the tooth how much you've trimmed unless it becomes translucent. It's all going to be filled in with denture base. So I just automatically, I know it's going to hit right here where I'm tapping my spatula here, that neck of number 5. And number 5. And I look down the buccal line angles. I don't have one sticking out. Central groove, they're lining up. Now I'm going to look at this angle, and I've got it tilted, kind of drifting. If I can zoom in just a touch. I've got it drifting distally. I got to rotate. These are straight up and down. These are perpendicular. 4, 5. So I need this angle. I need this angle. That it's not sticking out. Now, Vita, on their master models of this mold, the buccal cusp tips of number 4, if you haven't noticed, are really pointy. There's a higher degree of number 4, 5 versus 5, 6, and 7. So if I'm using these teeth, visually the cusp tip of number 4, the buccal cusp tip, is too high. It kind of throws me off, so I'll reduce it slightly. So I have the same type of line angles for number 4, number 5, number 6, and incoming number 7 very shortly. I'll put this on screen if you want to see me trimming it. It's a bit of a mess. Be careful not to lose your teeth. Get a good grip on them. And number 7. Down. I can use my plane to line up the central grooves, line up the lingual cusps.
That's brown line.
This one is? I'm always saying this one here. Crest of the ridge, pound line at the back. Synonymous in my terms. Apologies. So glad to have the anatomy teacher with me. That's what I need. That's what I need. Now, before I make any small tweaks, I'm going to go and add some wax. Get some of the major, if you want to talk about, everyone says, oh, the wax contracted, it shrunk. Well, put it on. While it's contracting and shrinking, what do you think I'm going to do? If that's what it does. You told me it does. I'm going to do the other side. I'm not going to sit here and watch it. Unless we're making, the chia pet type of denture. Water it and watch it grow. No. Put the wax on here. I'm going to need wax there anyways. Try not to put wax all over the occlusion of the teeth. You'll just have to take it off. Put the wax where it's needed. And I think wax control is probably the biggest skill that we're learning here. As well as number 2, we're not so much learning to set up teeth as we're learning to visualize where they go. Dental technology is not necessarily about a good hand as much as it is a good eye. What you see. We are training here what you see. This is most challenging. This is full mouth rehabilitation. Whether it's zirconia, whether it's on CAD-CAM, whether it's in wax, whether it's in gold, whether it's in temporary provisions, like temporary crown bridge, the goal is the same. Putting these teeth in the neutral zone. I can go back while the wax is still soft. I can change anything I need to. If I go onto this buccal line angle, you see number 4 is a little bit sharp of a line angle, so I'm going to reduce it just slightly. And as I went in there, I think I knocked number 6, and I'm going to move number 7. So I'm not setting up one at a time. Yes, I'm setting up one at a time to get in the right position, roughly, and then I'm adding wax, I'm going back, and then changing it again. And this is what I think is going to expedite our denture setup, rather than laboring over one tooth. The position of one tooth is fine, but also when we put its antagonist beside it, is what's going to change my perception of the position. I could introduce the flat plane at this stage, but I've got to be really careful that I'm hitting the natural teeth on this side. These are still higher than the plane of occlusion. If you wish, you can reduce these to the plane of occlusion. As I've done. And I could now use my flat plane here. Or I could take them off completely. Less dusty. Won't fill up my suction unit. And I'm going to set up the other side. A little bit more saw here. I can use my knife, reduce a little bit more of the tooth structure down to the CEJ. Don't be cavalier and take a lot more off and start to do bone augmentation, because this denture has to draw post-surgery. There's no choice. It's got to go. I'm just having a moment here with the work area. I can't. Get all the dust and wax out of my way. I'm just going to incorporate it into my setup, all that stuff. So, I'm going to go back and trim number 4. I haven't gone back and done the other side. It's still soft. I think this is going to help you. It's going to help expedite your denture setup. I really do. Now, some of you may be watching and saying, wow, you just stuck them in. Not really. there was some careful consideration of where the teeth went. This number 4 is going to be challenging again because of the bone support, or a lot of bony ridge there. Going to thin out the neck of number 4, really thin, and get it in place. Then number 5, the same thing. See if it's too high. It's very close. Number 6. Now we're going to add compensating curve. How much depends on the condylar guidance. For doing average value mounting, it's probably similar to that 20-degree setup rule that you used in the previous year. And number 7. The wax or the ridge or the size of the tooth should not dictate its location. I think I've lost my ridge line transposed here on top. Now, this is an exercise. Possibly I may have used a slightly smaller mold or larger mold and dropped the bicuspid. I don't want to have any occlusion on an inclined plane back here. I think we even saw in the presentation last week from the Dental Technology Guild fellow in Edward Montpetit. Did he not have that in his presentation? And this is our last denture philosophy, which I'll be talking to you about next year in implantology class. We're going to talk about the last, let's say, pioneer of denture occlusion is Dr. Gerber. And Dr. Gerber is a culmination of the lingualized occlusion of Dr. Hildebrand. And Dr. Gerber philosophy is based in the company of Candelar, their articulator, and their teeth. Probably Candelar are the true lingualized teeth, as we're using some here that can be adapted in both cusp marginal ridge occlusion and tooth-to-tooth occlusion lingualized. But the NFC of Candelar, or the nanofill composite resin teeth, we will discuss next year's implantology project number 1. So here I have my teeth in here. I haven't introduced my flat plane. I can get my alcohol torch to soften up the other side just slightly. I've pretty much got all the teeth in play here, nice and soft all the way around. I'm going to introduce the flat plane. And for education purposes, I'll put all of them on the flat plane because I think we have to start there. Most of you are pretty good, but I still see some people where we've got things not in line. I'm even adjust a little bit of my anterior teeth, just slightly. The only thing I used previously to check my anterior teeth was the freeway space of my anterior 6 upper versus my anterior 6 lower, and then that was my plane of occlusion, which is roughly was a little off. Now, I'm all on the flat plane, but that's just the buccal cusp tips. I should have a look on the underside from behind. from this angle and see if I can get the lingual cusp tips to touch as well. Because sometimes we have this kind of lingual version of our teeth set up. And this is going to help us get us the right emergence angle, straight up and down. Back here. If we look and I expose this mark here of my plane of occlusion from before, I'm pretty much spot on. I'm pointing to this area right here and under the wax on this side. My plane of occlusion was there. Kind of rubbed off. Now that I've moved some things around, I see that the prominence of 3-3 was a little bit more than 4-3. The cusp tip of number 4-4, as I reduce 3-4, I'm going to reduce that as well. It's a little too pointy, so this will bring it in the same line angle, incisal line angle, buccal cusp tip line angle, 4, 5, 6, 7. It's similar. This one here, number 5, needs to be rotated. Not straight up and down. I think very rarely in the denture setup is that you set the teeth up and then you're satisfied with the position. You're constantly changing them. And like I said, we could go on for a very long time and make slight minor rotations here and there. And what takes us a long time is that we're working on one at a time, and it's too painful now to take it out of the wax when it's already solidified to change it. So now that I'm very close, I'm adding more wax because my next stage is wax up. Whether it's wax up for try-in or wax up for process, I'm going to have some buccal contour here in the wax up, so I'm going to add it now. And then while it is solidifying and possibly shrinking slightly, then I can kind of go back with my plane and double check. After I'm satisfied with these lowers in their position, I'm going to add the upper 8. I'm going to add the upper 8, and then we're done. Now, sometimes, depending on the tooth manufacturer we're using, you might set up the first bicuspid maxillary first before putting on the lower posteriors to see if we have the space or a diastema between 3 and 4. With experience, I saw that it was going to line up fine. But tooth manufacturers, including Vita here, they have 5 lower molds, lower anterior molds versus 25 upper anterior molds. And they suggest that these 5 lower molds should work with all of the upper molds. The truth of the matter is, the upper molds are multiplied because they have the same measurements in square, tapering, and ovoid. Or ovoid, round, rectangular, whichever tooth company it is. And sometimes the measurements are off. They're not exactly the same. So let's say if we have 46.6 that goes with this lower mold. This one here happens to be T49. If we went to an R47, it's 1.5 millimeters narrower. Well, if it's 1.5 millimeters narrower, then we're adjusting over jet, or we're incorporating some small amount of diastema, or we're trying to close it creatively, maybe crowding in the lower anteriors somehow. And I'm sure you've had this experience where you're doing your setup and you say, well, I've got no room for my bicuspid. And you start to shave the canine to squeeze it in. Especially if we're doing the other setup method where you may set up the first molar first against the upper first molar, then fill in the lower anteriors last. And if you put the lower 6 anteriors last, then you realize, oh, I have no room. So we'll put smaller ones in. Or we'll trim these to fit. or we'll overlap them and rotate them slightly. There is no one hard and fast rule. But sometimes I'll put the first bicuspid upper in here just to see that I know it's going to approximate in the right position of my cusp marginal ridge between 4 and 5 of the lower. I could tell by the position of 3 from experience I was in the right position, so I didn't do that. If I see my 3's on top of 3, then I got to think, uh-oh, lingualized occlusion, 0 degree, grinding something in. So I'm going to continue to make sure that these are on the plane. They don't fall off the ridge like I have a little bit back here, adjusting my 4th quadrant.